So our next speaker is Leonard. He's going to talk about Click, the command line interfaces with Python. Chris, the floor is yours. And if you can introduce yourself as well.
All right. My name is Chris Leonard. I'm a DevOps and software engineer with a company here in town called Terminal Labs. Before that, I was a startup co-founder, and before that, I spent 20 years working at the intersection of tech and Texas politics, and I'm glad not to do that anymore. So this package, Click, is for creating command line interfaces in Python that work just like binary command line interfaces. So what do I mean by that? Everybody knows that you've been able to run Python files from the command line, and you can actually pass these things arguments. But it's a little sloppy compared to the command line interfaces that you can do with binary files. So Click creates this whole thing to allow you to turn this into something that can just be run on the command line. This isn't a particularly good example because you're actually calling the file in the same way, but there's a way to make this into just that, where you just type hello and feed it your options. These examples are, a lot of the examples on here are either really obtuse or these simple like hello world kind of things. So what I wanted to create was something that is still sort of arbitrary, but actually does something. What I'm doing is I'm consuming this current weather API and then doing stuff with it. And the way that I do that, I create a database, or I've got a database that'll be created in a second. I set my API key to an environment variable. Anybody know we've got some beginners. If you don't know what an environment variable is, it's a way to set a variable on your system so that it can be read by a program but isn't in your actual source code. This is a function that uses the request library to get the current weather given some attributes like you feed it your API key, language, city, and what units you want to use, Fahrenheit or metric. Log weather just inserts some data into a database, in this case, SQLite. Then the actual command we're going to call is CLI within this module. And I get the response, I output a string, log the weather, and that's that. So this whole file basically creates a command line interface that goes and grabs this API data and does something with it. The interesting thing that is not in that first example is we're using Python's setup tools, the setup tools package. Anybody who doesn't know what this is, it's a way to put programmatic hooks at the beginning of installing something via pip that you can do in Python, like defining some attributes. In this case, I'm creating the SQLite file. I define my requirements. And this is the important part. Entry points allows you to define a console script called getWeather that goes into that weather service package, into the service module, and calls that CLI thing. Now, if we go back and look in a little more detail at this, if anybody is unfamiliar with decorators, decorators are a way of wrapping functions in Python with other functions to extend their capabilities. So in this case, we have imported the Click package, and there are 4 decorators on top of this function that wrap it in this other functionality. If you're unfamiliar with decorators, that's a lot to try to get your head wrapped around. But it's basically just configuring this function to work with click. So the first one just registers it as a command. Then this allows us to set the options, the little flag options that you see all the time in command line commands. And so I can set the city, I set a default, and then it has a little help string with this option. So all of this is one decorator that basically says, if you provide a city, pass it into the function. If you don't provide a city, then call it Austin, Texas. And I'll show you what the help file does in a second. Units, this is from the API, M for metric, S for scientific for Kelvin, I for Fahrenheit, etc. And then it supports a number of languages, so you can pass these little strings and get your response in that language. So all this stuff configures those flags to work with this function.
Well, why do you need multiple languages?
The API it supports multiple languages, and I chose to implement it.
No, I get it, but why do you need, like, the error messages have a different language? Or what's like the...
the response from the API. You'll see in just a second.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to... Oh, I know what I forgot to do. I'm going to put this in the chat real quick, so if anybody wants to play along with this or explore it later. So I'm going to actually go through installing this and demonstrating it. CD into the package. I already have a, you need to do this in an environment of some sort. I use Anaconda. You could use a virtual environment. So I've already created environment for this. And then I'm going to pip install in editable mode.
We're not seeing the screen that you're typing on. You must have multiple windows or something.
I do, but that's the one that I, no, I don't want that.
You have to share your entire screen, so if you switch, then you probably chose only the browser.
Oh, okay. I see. Sorry, I'm used to Zoom. All right, so I, in this directory, I git cloned my own repository, CD'd into it, and then I already have a Conda environment activated. And then what I'm going to do here, you wouldn't do this with a package that you're downloading from PyPI, but for this instance, I'm going to install the code in my current working directory in editable mode, and I'll show why in a second. So that attempts to install all the stuff. It says it's already, the requirement is already satisfied because this is the environment that I used to develop this. In those little help strings, again, get weather is the name of the CLI command that I created. So by providing those little help strings to your options, you get this help file just as you would with any other binary that you run from the command line. Because it has defaults, I can run get weather, and it says the weather in Austin, US is scattered clouds with a temp of 80.9. So that's using all three of the defaults, Austin, Texas, Fahrenheit in the English language. But I can change any combination of those things. You also notice another interesting thing about, I forgot to mention this earlier. is that if you've done a lot of work on the command line, you'll see that there's often multiple variants of the same option. So I've implemented that here, so you can use the long units or the short U. It makes it very easy to do that by just providing 2 arguments to the decorator function. So if I say get weather and just change the language to Spanish, it's still Austin, Texas, but this description, along with other things that come from the API, actually returns a lot of information. I'm only using a little bit of it.
Oh, okay. This is where I'm confused. Like it translates the word scattered cloud from English to Spanish. This is what it did, or does it have like a vocabulary? Like, is it something that has to do with click, or something that has to do with your own app?
No, nothing to do with either one. This is the API that I'm ingesting.
The API can change the language.
Yes.
Oh, and you just passing the option for it for click. Okay, now
I just implemented this as part of my little command line thing.
Yeah, I got it. It just passes the language to the API. Now I understand. I didn't understand. Yeah. I thought it was part of click.
No. Basically, I wanted to do more than I want to do more than just like spit out hello world. So I said, okay, I'll grab a weather API. And then I wanted to show how you can configure multiple options.
Yeah.
Right? So that's what that is. So I can set all of them. We can set the city to Chicago, the language to French, and the units to metric. And the reason I installed it in editable mode, this is like for hacking on this thing. It's not for, again, if this was like a third-party service that you were installing to use on your machine, you probably wouldn't install it in editable mode. I'm going to go in here. This is off screen, but I'm editing this code base that I've actually installed. And so now it has 3 exclamation points at the beginning, at the end. So as you're developing something like this, you can have it pip installed, registered with your system, and you can make changes on the fly. That's how I developed this. But the end result is just to get all of that functionality in a simple, familiar command line interface that's really elegant. Some of the other benefits of this package that I did not implement is that it supports subcommands. So if you've ever run pip install Flask, pip is a command, install is a subcommand, and then Flask is an argument. So I have chosen to implement 3 options, flag options, but you can also implement arguments. Pretty much anything you've ever seen in a command line interface, you can do this, and you can do it with Python. The interesting thing, it's a little more advanced. Mike, I didn't even talk to you about this. This was after we talked earlier. So if you're not super familiar with the command line, what you might not realize is anything that you type on the command line is calling some program somewhere on your system. There is a binary file called ls that's in your system somewhere. And so when you type that, it looks for it and then it runs it. So that means this get weather command has to exist somewhere. Sorry. So what Click actually does behind the scenes when you use that setup .py and tell it to register get weather and point it at your code, it creates this Python file in the bin directory of the virtual environment or the Conda environment that I'm working in. So when I type get weather, it looks in the path and it finds that, and this is the script that it runs. I haven't fully been through it. Basically what it looks like it does is, because this is in your environment, as is your code, it goes into that pip installed, looks for the setup console scripts, and attaches the defined console script in Click to an actual executable Python file. So that's how it works beneath the hood. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, this can only be run if you have like some kind of Python environment, right? So you have to open up the environment and then you can run this, right? Like it's not like if you get out of the environment, like right now you're in the Click demo, Anaconda, I think you said it's Anaconda environment or Conda environment. But if you get out of it, can you still run it? Okay.
Oh, so that's interesting. My path must be set to have that in the path.
It's something that Anaconda does when you activate a virtual environment. When you write activate a certain environment, that it sets the path to the correct things.
Yeah.
Oh, but I bet if
you deactivate your environment, it will stop working because the staff will no longer be working. At least I assume this is the case.
Well, I just opened up a new terminal. And it's still saying that it can't find this is the actual repository, the package pip installed. So I don't know 100% about the internal of how that works.
Yeah. It's probably because it's dependent on Python, so it's not generally like a binary or something like that, right? Like you still need a Python environment to be able to run it, if I understand right. Yeah,
so that's true. It's sort of a trade-off. You're not writing C.
Yeah.
You can use the command, the CLI tool as an entry point for a very complex system.
Yeah.
In fact, at Terminal Labs, they've developed some really complex stuff with Click that spins up huge environments for like data science that just work out of the box.
Yeah. I'm still actually very excited about this because I was looking to create something like the AWS, the command, AWS, whatever it's called, the command line.
Yeah.
And we create some big systems that need to have these more simplified commands, and this is actually it's very exciting. So I'll take a look at it. It's going to help quite a bit.
Yeah, and I haven't. If you go into the documentation, it's quite complex. So you parameters / arguments, options. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff for the. Or I guess arguments and parameters are different. Oh, I think parameters is a top level for both options and arguments. Commands and groups, I have no idea what that means. Documenting strings is the help thing. And then you can create subcommands. So something like pip that has, multiple layers of, commands and options, you can implement something like this in Python.
Nice.
With Click. So I've just started using this. I haven't used it for anything practical. Mm-hmm. Something I'm really interested in being able to do, which is why I offered to do this.
Yeah. This is like I was looking like it was something like AWS CLI, like it has all these. Like you can do. Right. You have these APIs in the background that you access, but as far as the user is concerned, it's just like a command. And I think this is actually a good solution for that. Create something like that, especially when you create these big systems that do a lot of complicated things on the background, but you can simplify it a little bit with these commands.
I have a question about this one. Click, if Click supports argument, all of those things, how does it interact with things like argparse or even the simple getting the argv stuff from system, this argv vector, and using it from within the program? Is it something mandatory, or Click kind of overrides whatever argparse does if you write it, or
you don't use all that stuff from sys. So Click command registers it as a command. Then each of these options in a row are mapped to these arguments of the function itself.
So the same thing if I use argv, for example, sys.argv, I'm getting all of the things that happen in Python. Sys.argv return just like in C a vector where the name of the command is in vector 0 and then every other argument afterwards return. So probably argv will return all of the things that you written down, maybe not. I'm not sure.
You don't use argv.
No, I can still use argv. Within the program, I have a program that's used argv for some reason. And then I wrap it up with click. What happens? This is my question.
I don't know, because there's no need to use argv.
You might still use it.
For what?
Because old code uses it and you wanted to use old code. You wrapped old code with this. I'm trying to tell you scenarios that might happen, and I'm speculating how. You're saying if you're writing something new, use click because you're using it anyway. Makes sense. But if it's old code that I need to reuse, or wherever someone already wrote down all of the argument parsing, we're using argparse.
If you want to know, you should start it up yourself and do print sys.argv and see what happens.
Yeah. I'm asking if he knows already. I can do it myself. I'm asking here because he already knows this library.
Unless you really had some complex legacy function that used argv, I can't think of a reason to do that.
Okay, well, in argparse?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to answer your question.
Oh, okay, okay.
This already provides an interface for working with all of your arguments and all of these flags.
Yeah, so the question is whether the interface itself interfaces with argparse, so it got
So someone answered in chat that argv is unchanged.
Okay, so argv will probably return to you the same thing, okay. And what about argparse? Is it something?
I might be a little bit confused about what you're asking, but are you asking how to port? So if you have a click an application that's not using click, but you have a CLI tool that's using a traditional implementation of like argv, are you asking how to you're asking for the procedure of how do you go about?
No, I'm saying what happens if I just used click to create it into a CLI? Like I wanted click, the only thing what it does, it implants whatever I did inside this. It will still work the same, correct?
You can make you can make it work the same. So if you have a tool that was made with argv, you can port it and to run in click.
Good. So this is my question. So it doesn't conflict.
You have to do the manual work of doing the porting yourself. There's no conversion tool that you can run an argv implementation through that will output a click implementation. That forking process and porting process is going to be a manual thing.
Okay. You're saying that you have to be careful, basically. Okay, makes sense. It's good enough answer.
Does it support tab completion for subcommands and flag names?
That I don't know, Mike. Do you know if it supports completion?
Yes, you can get it to work. You can get tab completion to work.
Yeah, I didn't.
It's pretty advanced for click, and you have to get. It's definitely pushing the design expectation, but yeah, you can do it.
Well, I think tab completion is the really nice thing that if you're using Git, you're always want to tab complete all the subcommands and all the arguments, right? It makes a huge difference.
I have one quick question. What about help files and stuff like that? Can you create some help libraries and documentation for your specific CLI that you create? Is there a way to create that documentation?
It does that by itself.
Oh, it does? Okay, cool.
If you want Sphinx documentation for the web or something like that, I think he was asking maybe. Right, suppose I want to put my API docs on a website, on readthedocs.io, and
Use Sphinx or one of the standard tools to do that. So this creates the same sort of help you get when you run help on a binary command line tool, and that's what all that configuration does. That's what this does.
But like if you wanted to automatically create like API docs for the command line command, then you have to do that yourself.
And I think Sphinx or one of the other tools that you would generally use for that sort of thing anyway could be used in this context.
Yeah, real quick. So in a scenario where you're going to use whatever environment you're using to create code to then move it into a command line prompt, what is the real world application for that? Like, what can you touch on, like how how something like this, implementing, I believe, what is an API into command line prompt, how could that benefit anybody in any scenario?
So I arbitrarily used. So I wanted to come up with like a use case that was not necessarily real world, but actually did something.
Okay.
So I chose to implement the consumption of a weather API just to show what this tool can do.
Okay.
I could have written something that like deleted half the files on my computer or whatever.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out this whole weather API situation, and I didn't realize it would
I
be
can give you an example. So the reason I'm excited about this, so we have some noise.
Yeah, that's me. I apologize.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, so the reason I'm excited about this tool is like imagine that you create this big platform, some big system, right? And it does a lot of things. And I know Chris mentioned something about like with data science. Data science teams needs a lot of support in this infrastructure that normally like the devops guys put together. And so you need all these servers that need to come on. So you end up with this big system. And instead of just always using, I don't know, like you create these APIs that you have to call all the time to make things happen in that platform, right? And so you can use these other tools, like I don't know, you can use some web tools to call those APIs, but normally, like if I'm somebody that has to support all this, it's much more natural for most people to practically have a command line interface that does in the background. It goes and makes all those API calls, and instead of actually having, let's say, you might use like Postman. Yeah, somebody wrote Postman. Yeah. So instead of using Postman, which is practically, it's an application that does API calls for you. Instead of using Postman, you can compress all that into a command line. So that's why I was excited about this when I saw it. I like Chris is going to talk about it because it can. And I was looking to, I didn't have the time, but I was looking to eventually create some command line interface more similar if anybody's familiar with the AWS, the CLI, and I think this is going to help with that. But that's to me is a real world application for this.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That really sort of brought the him bringing that module forward. What you said really brought it to life there. So I'm able to have a big perspective on that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, again, so Terminal Labs, Mike is my colleague at Terminal Labs. Mike wrote, and one of the other guys wrote a thing that spins up a really complex a data science environment from a single command line. And so, and I really like the example of something like AWS, or if you had APIs you needed to call from like around the internet to combine to do something with it, instead of using Postman or spinning up Jupyter Notebook and importing requests. All you have to do is activate an environment and run a command, and you can program it to go do anything.
That's amazing.
It's basically eliminates the need to write Python and then the command. It moves. That's it. But it's good.
Well, but it also has subcommands.
Yeah, it allows you. It also allows you to define all of the arguments and parsing of the arguments, which is also handled by other Python libraries. So it takes those two things, merges them, and it's very nice and elegant. That's good. That's okay.
One of the things I actually like about it, and I thought about this because when I decided to give this talk, I was like, is this really that much better than just Python script with some arguments? One of the things you could do, it would be to provide a CLI to a client or a customer who is unfamiliar with Python but knows how to run basic terminal commands, right? So it's using Python to create elegant terminal commands that work just like everything else you've ever typed into a terminal. Yep. So for people like us, Jacob, is it that big of a deal? I don't know. I think it's...
No, it's another tool that optimizes things. There are many of those, and this is good. Another one.
Yeah, I think it is. So, like, imagine you can create these big platforms, and then if you are exposing those, let's say you're creating some big platform for the data science or some other group, and you want to have those people external to use your platform, then I think this can help tremendously. Again, by the fact that kind of hides all those complexities. Yeah, I'm actually quite excited about this one.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. Once you get your hands wrapped around it and start using it, and you think of all the stuff you've ever ran on a command line, the AWS CLI, all the pip and conda stuff. Part of me wanted to create like a hardcore real world example, but I didn't want to spend all day on it. So that's why I chose something kind of arbitrary, like, what data?
Yeah, this is good.
Okay. Are we finished with questions for this one?
Any other questions?
I don't have a question, but I do have just like another use case, if that would be helpful. So where I work, we use a lot of Docker-based tools. And of course, we deploy everything into these very heavily protected environments. So you end up having to forward something between maybe 10 and 15 different sets of credentials into each Docker image. And when you're typing that stuff out by hand, this ends up being like a 5 or 6 line long thing in your little bash terminal. And just typing the thing can often take longer than running the thing. So internally, we use Click to wrap around actually Docker's API, and it fetches the credentials from whatever service we're using. Maybe it's like AWS Vault, and it forwards them into the container on our behalf. Wiring that up using something like argv or argparse would be like, it's possible, it's just really tedious. And doing it in Click is incredibly simple.
If I ever meet you, I'm going to buy you a beer.
You're gonna meet him. He's one of the organizers.
Oh, I didn't see who it was. I probably already know you.
It's Dylan. He just hides behind Austin Python.
Yeah. Sorry. So both Florin and I are logged into the official account, so we can manage the meeting. But then you don't get to see my name.
I've got the chat open. I wasn't looking at the participants to see who was talking. Yeah, that's a great example. So any kind of automation. If you've ever just gotten tired of typing the same 5 lines of crap over and over again to do the same thing every day, you'd save yourself a little bit of time.
Yep.
I don't want to ask the really basic questions here, but you're saying, I just came in from walking the dog. This whole quick start for the Click module. How does it apply to this virtual environment? I apologize. Just to keep the conversation going.
Oh, I don't even know. Because it's installing dependencies and stuff, you're probably going to want to... have you used virtual environments before?
I've gotten a couple of errors involving them, but no, I haven't.
Virtual environment is basically an isolation of the dependencies for a project that you're working on.
Okay.
Right? So the version of Python and the versions of the different tools that you're using. So that when you're working on that project, it runs in a virtual environment. And so because this particular project uses a couple of external libraries, the Click library itself, and then Python requests. And by the way, the Click was created by the Palettes project, who are the same people behind Flask and the related packages like Jinja. So I just happened to wind up on this page, and it's actually an old version. You probably, if you were developing a Flask app or really anything, any project you're working on, you ought to do in some sort of virtual environment, or like I chose to do, in a Conda environment.
Yeah, I believe PyCharm sets up a virtual environment initially, correct?
I believe that's true. And so I added you on LinkedIn and sent you my email address so we can go over that more.
Oh, yeah, I apologize.
No, it's fine. Quit apologizing. Quit apologizing for being beginners.
Tough. I'm the only one over
apologizing. Do I need to come over there?
I mean, if you can help me out, then sure. But.
See how bad my first Python was, and I've been writing other languages for a long time.
Well, I appreciate you guys being very accepting of beginners. I think I would imagine it's important, cultivating. It's clearly the field doesn't need any kind of advertisement. Seems like a lot of people are interested.
I was talking to a recruiter friend. He's a tech recruiter that I've known for years, and I haven't talked to him in quite a while. And when I told him what I was doing, which is kind of a combination of Python and a lot of AWS stuff, he's not technical himself, but he's like, that's everything he's getting asked for from clients involves some combination of Python and AWS.
Yeah, it seems like what I'm hearing is scripting hardware, scripting environments, scripting software. Everything is about how can I automate the setting up of really complex systems very simply, which I think fits very well with the Click thing that you guys are talking about here. Right, even networking.
Imagine you would even like infrastructure as code with it.
Yeah.
But that's a whole other,
But it's the same story. It's along the same storylines, even though they don't have to use the exact same tools.
And I can imagine using it to like automate stuff on your machine, like cleaning out your trash and cleaning out caches and resetting stuff. Just because I'm a dork and I think that would be cool.
So let's say that I'm just thinking like a hypothetical here, right? Let's say that I'm a Windows admin and I use PowerShell, right? Or I'm a Linux admin and I'm used to Bash. I would use this wherein I've got a bunch of Python tools that obviously I cannot replicate in Bash or PowerShell, and I want to package them all together and then interface with them, potentially through my Bash scripts or potentially through my PowerShell scripts, right? That would probably be, if I'm trying to use this in a broader context, is that how it would be packaged up?
I could see you using this for something like that. I'm not familiar with PowerShell. I haven't used a Windows machine in decades. But yeah, if you had combinations of different tools that you needed to use in conjunction with one another, Python makes it really fairly easy to call like Bash scripts using the sub-process package. So I could see orchestrating your entire workflow in Python. And really, I think the benefit of this is for those of us for whom Python is like a first-class citizen in our lives, right? So I can write a Bash script. I can do lots of other things. But if I wanted to orchestrate a complex workflow, and Python is my go-to, which it is, it's what I do every day, I like the idea of creating a really elegant command line tool that works just like every other command line tool, but do it in Python.
Yeah, and especially how like they have like data science people that write Python every day. I think they want to create tools like this. That's another good thing there. So yeah,
I mean, let's say you were a data scientist and you had a bunch of different models and a bunch of different systems that had APIs. You could write a really complex web app that like grabs all that data, or you could write one of these scripts that goes and hits all these APIs and gets you a summary.
Yeah.
Right? It's down and dirty and it's just for you. It's not scalable. But we've all done hackish things like that before, so.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like a very helpful tool to me. Yeah, I'll definitely take a look at it. Yeah, thank you for sharing this one. This is an awesome tool.
Yeah, if you want to ping me, if you want to chat about it, or if you find some stuff that I haven't gotten into yet, the tab completion, I'm really interested in because that would be cool to implement.
Yeah, that's another cool one. Yeah.
So, are we ready to thank you?
Yeah, if there are any more questions in the chat or live. All right, I guess there's no more questions. Well, thank you so much, Chris. This is awesome.
All right.
Presentation.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm stopping the recording right now, but don't go away.